from Roxbury, being a lifelong Roxbury resident, it looks a little bit different here than it did when I grew up in the 90s. So it's nice to see the neighborhood is consistently changing and growing and developing. So I got my start in the district office of Councilor Chuck Turner when I was in high school. Back as a high school student, it was important for me to be able to learn what city services were and how city services were accessible to me as a high school student. That was imperative to starting me off in my career in public service. From that time, I have committed myself to staying active and engaged in politics, staying active and engaged in the community. After I went to Howard University School of Law, I had a strong history in working in the city, the federal, and the state government. I worked for the FAA under the Obama administration. I worked for the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and I also worked for the Boston Office of Fair Housing and Equity, where I had some of my most prominent professional experiences and some of the experiences that I'm the most proud of. So folks would come into the Boston Office of Fair Housing and Equity, they had faced discrimination, or they felt that they had been discriminated against in some way. They felt that they had been discriminated against in terms of their race, in terms of their Section 8 status, in terms of their disability, and we would help them through the process, help them to understand what their legal rights were. At the time, my favorite case was an elderly black woman who came into the office. She felt that she was being discriminated against by both her landlord and her neighbors, and she felt that she was being treated unfairly. She couldn't understand exactly what was happening to her. She was also facing eviction based on that discrimination. So my office ran the investigation from top to bottom. We met with co-counsel, we met with the complainant, and we were able to ultimately find for discrimination against her, that she was being discriminated against for her Section 8 status. So the determination that I wrote helped to keep that woman in her house, helped her to stay where she was living and the community that she was comfortable in, and it ultimately helped to stem displacement in that instance. From the Boston Office of Fair Housing and Equity, I worked for the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and I was also able to graduate from Howard University School of Law. From Howard Law, I learned a lot of the skills that are going to be necessary and the things that I'm looking for in the next city councilor. I learned negotiation skills. I learned when to hold them, and I learned when to fold them. I learned when you need to compromise to meet a larger goal. I also learned what it's like to advocate strongly, passionately for clients who don't necessarily always know what their legal rights and legal remedies may be. So I also learned the importance of knowing the law. I learned the importance of relationship building with city legislators, with state legislators, and of course, ultimately with the community that needs to be served and needs to have their voices heard. After I graduated from law school, now coming back into the community, seeking to have the opportunity to serve and to fight for three key issues. First, I want to make sure that we return a district office here to District 7, to our corner of the city. I feel like it's absolutely necessary for us to have a place to organize, for our folks to have a place to talk, for our young people to be able to get engaged in city services. We have a lot of business that's coming into the community. We have a lot of contractors who are coming into the community who are not necessarily compliant with the laws that are already in place. And we need to start demanding as a community that they are compliant. And if they're not, then we don't need to give them any additional contracts. And finally, the issue that I'd like to face is one that, of course, I worked on and was passionate about at Howard University, which is housing law, which is housing affordability, which is displacement issues, which is gentrification, all of which we're seeing rapidly change the face of our community. My top priority would be making sure that some of the developers who are coming into the community are providing more community benefits. That was the first issue that I decided to make part of my platform, because it was the first issue that I felt like wasn't being addressed enough. So we have a lot of development that's going on. I know the mayor's part of his 2030 plan has been to increase the level of housing all over the city, but that's coming at the cost of displacing a lot of the residents who are currently here. So I want to start to make a push for some of these developers to provide community benefits, either in the form of affordable units on site. I know that's controversial too. A lot of folks are trying to say, well, we should put it over somewhere else, but then that has an effect on the community as a whole. So I want to see more affordability on site. I want to start to challenge some of the developers, also to provide more affordable home ownership opportunities, which is going to be a wealth generator. So we don't want to just keep renting. And when we're talking about, I love the Gus Scotts, I used to work for them, but I read in the banner yesterday, $3,000 for a one-bedroom unit right in the heart of Dudley, and we're putting up a 25-story tower that's going to be changing the face of the community. We need to do a little bit better. So that's my main priority, is just starting to challenge some of the developers to make sure that they're at the very least complying with that 13% requirement to build affordable units, or like the Gus Scotts, which is a great thing, go a step above and take it up to 20%. For the past however many years, there's been construction going on in the city, and there's supposed to be building to certain standards, and they're also supposed to be, contractors are supposed to be complying with hiring 30% minorities, at least 10% women on each site, and 30% of Boston residents. So each of those things is not necessarily being complied with. So we've created a law, we've created a city ordinance that doesn't have an area of oversight. There's no group that goes around, besides a volunteer group, that goes around from site to site and says, well, I want to check and see how many women you have. I want to check and see how many minorities you have. So for that issue, it's not a question of creating a new law. The law is already there, but there's no oversight because there's no arm that's been delegated to do this work. So I think that it would be great to see that force, the force of volunteers that goes around, put into the city budget. And once we put them into the city budget, then we're saying we value this. We value this because we put our money behind it. And we're going to not continue to grant new projects and new contracts for companies that are non-compliant. I think so. I think it seems sometimes on the outside looking in, just seems so basic, but that's one step that we could definitely take. That's fairly easy, I think. Does anyone else have any questions? I think I have about 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at this time, then I guess I will just give my closer. And thank you all for coming here. This has been an incredible event. Thank you to RoxVote for putting together this and a whole host of other events to help to inform the voters about who we are as candidates. I know there's a million of us, so thank you all for coming and coming again and again and again. As a lifelong Roxbury resident, my candidacy and my campaign has never only been about me. It's been about using the skills that I've developed over the past 15 years professionally and 32 years, because a lot of people have a question about how old I am, so 32 years, as a Roxbury resident. I want to make sure that I'm giving back to my community and that I'm able to have a stake in the future of Roxbury, the future of Boston overall. So for those reasons, I definitely feel like when we're talking about candidates, I know a lot of folks have their favorites, but we want to make sure that the person that we put in that position is not just standing on their own opinion, because opinions are great, but everybody has one. We want to make sure that the person that we're putting in that seat is standing on the law and actually knows what they're allowed to do as a city councilor, what is outside of their purview, and how they can actually advocate to advance the interest of District 7 residents. So for all of those reasons, I feel like I make a great candidate. I'm the candidate that you're looking for. I hope you go to my website, and I thank you all for coming here. I'm number 6 on the ballot, September 26th, and I look forward to engaging with you all, both now and in the future.